Then I have my pathophysiology book. Oh, and the field guide is by Judith Hopfer Deglin and April Hazard Larand. And the Davis's Comprehensive Handbook of Laboratory and Diagnostic Tests is by Anne M. Van Leeuwen and Deborah J. Pohusla. Then I have the lovely pathophysiology book. This baby of like huge. It's literally like I could consider this weights for my workout. And this is by Carol Matson-Forth and Glenn Matfin. This book is awesome, especially also again if you're doing your care plans. It kind of breaks down certain disorders. Like for example, I was doing a concept map on a patient that had cirrhosis or liver problems. He broke it down and explained it to me in terms that I understood, because sometimes medical terms are hard to understand, especially if you haven't taken medical terminology. So I recommend you also take medical terminology if you can. If not, you will definitely learn, and this book is really helpful in helping you learn those terms. It's kind of like going back into anatomy and physiology, but just going into the physiology part, not too much into the anatomy. But it does tell you about the anatomy as well, so it's a really handy dandy book. It's quite heavy, but worth it to add to your library of nursing books. And then I have the lovely Fundamentals of Nursing by Carol Taylor, Carol Lillis, Priscilla Lamone, and Pamela Lynn. But usually we call it the Taylor book because it's a pretty long title, and this is the 6th edition. And this book, out of all the books, I pretty much use this a lot. It tells you all like the assessments to do. It goes into the different theorists. It also does treatments, interventions to do for certain problems. It has pictures. It's a pretty heavy book, but it's way worth it. It's worth your money. It's another book that you can add to your library and add to your nursing collection of books, and I recommend you get this book. I think there is a newer edition, and mine is a little bit like folded on the edges, and kind of the pages are all folded up, but this book is amazing. If anything, it tells you, like what the title says, the fundamentals of nursing. And this book you probably use in your first quarter, and I remember I used it during the first year, especially the first quarter, and throughout the rest of nursing school. So this is a definite worth your money if you're ever going through nursing school, or if your school requires you to get a book like this. I also have this Health and Physical Assessment, 3rd edition, by Bert Koskas, Bauman, Darling, and Fisher. Couldn't read the first name, kind of weird. But this book is pretty old school. The pictures are kind of all old, awkward. Some of the pictures are a little older, and I don't think they use this book anymore in the school that I'm going to right now for the next year's group. But this is definitely good, especially in the first quarter when you're trying to understand physical assessments and actually do physical assessments. It breaks it down for you and tells you why physical assessments are done, the importance of physical assessments, and it breaks it down into each of the systems that you need to assess. So, good book. And then finally, the last textbook I have for you guys is Medical Surgical Nursing by Ignatavicius and Workman. We call it the AP book. It is also a big book. It's also considered a weight, but this is definitely an awesome book, especially if you're going into medical surgical nursing. It has a lot of the disorders breaking down to each system: cardiac, respiratory, nervous, and it tells you the breakdown of the nursing process through each disorder or problem that you have. For example, coronary artery disease, it will tell you the assessment, the implementation, the planning that needs to be done, interventions that you can do for that patient with that disorder, and then the evaluation of what occurs. So this book is also amazing. This goes hand in hand with the Taylor book, I believe. These are the two books this is also another book I used for care plans. It helped me figure out interventions if I didn't use my other nursing diagnosis handbooks that are pre-handed. So also a good book for you to look out for medical surgical nursing. Especially if you are going to med-surg, I definitely think you should get this book. Okay, so these books weren't on our textbook list. These are just books that I bought or my mentors lended me because there are extra resources for certain classes and especially for care plans. So for medical surgical nursing, which I took this past year for these past 2 quarters, I used this handy book, The Medical Surgical Nursing, Prentice Hall Nursing, Views and Rationales, 2nd edition by Mary Ann Hogan and all those other authors. This book is so amazing. I think it was about $30-something in Barnes & Noble. This book in our school goes by really fast, and I think literally everyone has this in our program. It comes with a CD-ROM, and it breaks down what you found in the Iggy book into something much smaller and more in terms that you can understand. It also gives you pre-questions before the start of the quarter to see how you are, how much you know about each system, and then post questions after. And these are NCLEX questions, and they're pretty handy. I know some teachers use them in their tests, but this thing is amazing. I never really used the CD-ROM, and I probably should have for NCLEX practice. I might go back on that later. But each chapter is pretty long, but in comparison to the Iggy book, I think this is amazing. Sometimes it doesn't cover some certain disorders, but in general, I think it covers all the main points for each system, like the cardiac disorders. Chapter 3, it outlines it. So I got cut off, but for each, like for chapter 3, certain disorders, it will break it down into, for example, like a certain disorder. It will describe that disorder for you, give you the etiology and pathophysiology, break it down into assessments, priority nursing diagnoses, planning and implementation, medication therapy, client education, expected outcomes and evaluation, and interventions. So this is an awesome book. I definitely think it's worth the money, and it breaks it down for you in the best way possible. So again, it's by Mary Ann Mango. It comes with a CD-ROM, so if you could look out for this book in Barnes & Noble, definitely worth buying. And then I have 2 final books for nursing care plans, nursing concept maps. This one, there are 2 of them, and these are for like when you're on your step 4. I don't know if you call it step 4. Or where you have your nursing diagnoses and you break it down into the description and then the outcomes, goals and outcomes, and then the interventions. This one is awesome for interventions, and it comes with rationales. I know our instructors in my school were very strict on rationales. So in the beginning I didn't have this book, and I used my textbooks. And the textbooks are really handy, and they're sturdy, and they're awesome resources, but the only problem is sometimes you have a repetition of interventions that you use or same nursing diagnoses that you will use. So you'll have to continuously look for those pages where you found those interventions, or you're going to have to pull them in your book. And it's kind of tedious having to go back to your book each and every time. So this book is really handy because it has all the nursing diagnoses that you can think of. Anywhere from decreased cardiac output to bathing self-care deficit, insomnia, or constipation, acute confusion, or activity intolerance. It has everything in here for you. And this is the 9th edition Nursing Diagnoses Handbook. and it is by An Evidence-Based Guide to Planning Care, and it's by Betty J. Ackley and Gail B. Ladwick. And it is in the Evolve system, so some of these books are related to the Evolve, and they have an online version of this book. So if you're doing your concept maps online, you can probably get them straight from there and copy them onto your online concept map, because that's less writing for you. But for each diagnosis, it will break it down to the NANDASTEM for you, give a definition, defining characteristics, related factors, nursing outcomes and goals, and then it will break it down to interventions that you could write down for this specific nursing diagnosis. And there are a lot of nursing diagnoses that you can choose from. And sometimes they break it down into geriatric interventions or multicultural interventions, client teaching and discharge planning interventions, or home care interventions. So this is an awesome book. I don't think it came with a CD-ROM, but if you're ever having trouble writing nursing diagnoses, definitely have this book in mind, or get a copy of this book, or even do the Evolve online, and I think it's free online, so keep that in mind. And I got this from Barnes & Noble as well for $54.95. So the price on there. And this is from my mentor, one of my mentors. It's another nursing care plan book, Diagnoses, Interventions, and Outcomes by Meg Kulanick and Judith L. Myers. And this is the 7th edition. This is an awesome book as well. If I don't find anything in the Ackley book, I will find it in here. It also does the same exact thing. Breaks it down for you. It gives you the rationales, interventions, and the nursing diagnoses all in here. Just a different book. It's good to have two different kinds of anything, just in case you can't find one in the other, or you don't feel so good about the rationale and intervention in the other. You can look in here. If worse comes to worse, you have your textbooks to look out for and look in. Because I know my instructors in my school, they weren't very happy with finding stuff online, especially like Google. You can go probably end up anywhere online, and it might not even be a reliable source. So books are always your best option, unless you're subscribed to some special nursing or evidence-based practice website. Then that's a good, awesome resource. But these books are handy if you're ever in a tough time with doing your concept and care plans. So that's the books that I have that I've been using for nursing school. There's a bunch of other books that I have for labor and delivery and mental health. At the moment, I don't have them because my friend, I lent them to her and she's taking those courses at the moment. But if I ever get a hold of them again, I will definitely do another video on those two books. Those books are also pretty awesome and handy, and they're pretty standard for the classes that I took. So yeah, so that's all my books that I have been using during nursing school, and I have been going back to them for resources if I'm ever in a tough spot with my papers, which I am using them now again. So they're pretty handy. They might weigh a lot, but it's totally worth it. Nursing school, you definitely need this amount of books, and I'm pretty sure it's like that with any other major. So that's it for my book haul. I don't know how to say it. The nursing books that I have during the nursing program. So look out for my next nursing vlog. You guys have a good day. Talk to you later. Bye.